Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be drawing 3 of my characters from an amazing RPG on Roblox called Voxlblade. For those of you who haven't heard of this game, all you need to know is that it is a really fun RPG that allows for so many possible builds to have fun with. There are tons of different weapon combinations and armors that allow for really different builds and playstyles. For me, the fun of this game comes more from the build making rather than the quest completing and dungeon crawling, which is why I've made 7 different save files and I have all of them at max level. God damn, I have no life. Although I love Voxlblade, the game is still not complete, and I gotta say, the early game is pretty boring, and it's somewhat challenging to understand what combinations of weapons and armor work and, what doesn't, but I think if you give it a shot, and preferably play with friends, you would greatly enjoy the game. Alright, I think that's enough yapping about what Voxlblade is. Let's get to the drawing already. The first character I'm going to be drawing is from my first ever save file, and my first ever completed build. This is also the only save file that has never had a different build on it. I refer to this build as the Holy Healer, due to their main damage type being holy, and their role, or main gimmick, is that they are a healer. But if I keep calling her Holy Healer for the rest of the video, it's gonna get really weird, so I guess I'm just gonna have to give her a name. I'm not very good at coming up with names though, so if you have any suggestions, feel free to drop some in the comments. Anyway, the name I decided to go with is Elenira Clearwater. She is a high elf who wields a holy dagger and is a part of the Cleric Guild. Although I would love to show you all how the build works with what armor that I wear and everything else that's a part of the build, I believe that a lot of the fun that comes from Voxlblade is theory crafting a build and testing different combinations of things. If I just told you the answer, the game wouldn't be as fun. Also, I like my builds to be unique from everyone else, so no copying. However, I do want to showcase what the build can do. This build's DPS is really low, reaching an average of 77, but the real strength of the build comes from its 3 methods of healing, primarily the weapon art, Holy Shrine. Once the healing bursts are over, it averages around 280 to 300 total healing, which is absolutely amazing. Currently, the highest amount of health a player can even have is 240. Also, the heals deal damage to nearby enemies, and the total damage averages around 1,600. That's enough damage to kill large groups of smaller enemies with ease. The heal rune and cure cantrip both heal and deal decent amounts of damage too, but those are just meant as a backup. As an extra bonus, the enchants on the armor give the build a chance to reuse the weapon art instantly, which allows for even more damage and healing without having to wait for the cooldown. So that's going to wrap up the showcase. If you played a decent amount of Voxlblade, you can probably understand how most of the build works, but for any new players, maybe you might be able to figure it out over time. For the purpose of this video, I also wanted to come up with a backstory for these characters. Lore was never something that really impacted anything for these characters and their builds, but I thought it would be really fun to take all the parts of the build, like the character's facial features, race, armor, guild, and build type, and find a way to connect all of it together. You'll see that later in the video, I kinda had to get really creative. Also, as a side note, these backstories aren't fully accurate to Voxlblade's story, timeline, or locations. Anyway, let's start the story. Elenira Clearwater is a high elf born into the royal Clearwater family of the Overgrown Forest. She is the princess of the forest and was born with the ability to summon a magical sword, just like the rest of her family. Elenira's mother had encouraged her to study holy magic so that one day she could be a compassionate cleric like her mother. However, Elenira was not originally fond of this. She made her first holy sword at her castle's sword shrine and reluctantly started studying holy magic. Against her mother and father's wishes, Elenira always wanted to go out on adventures just like her older brother. Elenira's brother was able to convince their parents to allow them to go out on adventures together. Elenira greatly enjoyed adventuring, especially being able to get into some action against monsters, even though she could barely do anything. One day, while Elenira and her brother were exploring the Vinelands, they stumbled across a Draggator's den. Feeling confident in herself and her brother, Elenira rushed in to fight the dangerous creature. Her brother, deeply frightened by her decision, ran in after her. The fierce Dragator woke up and towered over Elenira. She was frozen with fear as the monster opened its mouth and a red glow began emanating from the back of its throat. Elenira's brother quickly dashed over to her and grabbed her, barely managing to avoid the Dragator's flame breath. After commanding his sister to stay back, Elenira's brother ran at the Dragator to slay it. After a fierce struggle, the Dragator managed to land a devastating hit on Elenira's brother, sending him flying into the cavern walls. Elenira, filled with adrenaline, managed to grab her brother and drag him out of the den before the Dragator could eat him. Her brother was lying in the murky swamp water, barely breathing, but Elenira was able to heal him slightly using her holy magic, which ended up saving his life. If it wasn't for her, Elenira's brother would not have returned home that day. Shortly after, Elenira declared she would become the best cleric in the world, and she devoted most of her childhood to the church. Ever since then, Elenira has fully devoted her life to saving people in battle through the use of holy magic, and she often joins crews of soldiers on their quest to stop the corruption plaguing the world of Voxlblade. And there you have it. Here is Elenira Clearwater, casting her holy shrine. The second character I'm going to be drawing is from my second save file. I call this build the Physical Shotgunner, which is kind of an oxymoron. This build gets its name from the main damage type being physical, and the main gimmick is that the build uses a shotgun. Now, if you've never played Voxlblade, you might be like, why is there a shotgun in a game called Voxlblade? Why don't they call it Voxel Gun instead? While I don't have a real answer, what I do know is that the guns in Voxlblade are awesome, and 2 of my 6 completed builds use them. Anyway, for the name of this character, I've chosen Eric Blastman. He is an elf who wields a physical hammer and shotgun, and he's a part of the Gladiator Guild. Now, earlier I said this build's main gimmick is the shotgun, but in reality, it's actually explosions. Let me show you. Now, without any buffs, the shotgun fires normally and doesn't really deal a ton of damage. But once I use my weapon art in Rune, the shotgun's bullets explode. This deals crazy amounts of damage and it has a big hitbox. This allows the build to hit around 728 DPS, which is pretty amazing. Even though this build has a hammer, it doesn't really get any use. While using the hammer, the build hits a measly 332 average DPS. This build is a lot of fun, and it took me a while to make this one. Originally, this save file had a flamethrower explosion build, which used a dynamite blade and flamethrower weapon art to create a huge amount of explosions. The only problem was that the explosion radius was really big, and it was super easy to hit myself, so I scrapped it. But because I love the explosions so much, I decided to try making a different explosion build. Now, let's move on to Eric Blastman's backstory. Eric Blastman is an elf who was born in Magus, the land of all things magic. Eric's father is a renowned alchemist who is very talented in the art of potion making. Eric grew up in Magus and was being taught how to be a great alchemist and magical power user. He also was taught how to use magic to summon a sword from his hands by the scholarly mage Lapis. However, throughout his youth, Eric was never really fond of magic or potion selling. Eric preferred to build inventions rather than make potions. After a long argument with his father, Eric decided to leave Magus and set out to Khaki Field. Eric had heard of a legendary gladiator named Pickles who could teach those who are worthy enough to be a strong gladiator. Eventually, Eric found Pickles and began trading. Over the course of a few years, Eric had become a strong gladiator who was very skilled at fighting using his gilded hammer. When Pickles felt that Eric had become strong enough, they told Eric about the legendary Bunny Prince who wielded a cannon on his back. Pickles told Eric that he's strong enough to defeat the prince and take his cannon in order to upgrade his hammer. Eric set out for the hair layer to fight the prince. And after a long and grueling fight, Eric managed to defeat the prince, but only because he had used health potions that he made using his dad's special formula. Eric managed to use the parts from the Bunny Prince's cannon in order to make a new hammer, and he also found a bounce room near the prince that he decided to take. After his battle, Eric returned to Pickles to show them his achievement. Pickles congratulated Eric and told him that he could use the bounce room to summon the Bunny Prince's explosive magic. After Pickles taught Eric how to use his new hammer, they said that there was nothing left to teach him. After hearing this, Eric decided he should go back to Magus in order to see his dad once again and thank him for everything he's done. After reuniting with his dad and moving back into Magus, Eric learned of a new technology that had emerged from the Magitech engineers called the Blaster Ring. This ring would allow sword summoners to summon a blaster alongside their sword. After seeing the properties of the Blaster Ring, Eric decided that he would learn how it works and engineer his own Blaster Ring that allowed him to summon a shotgun. Eric then sold his blueprints to Magitech and used the funds to help support his dad's potion market. Today, Eric is a bloodthirsty gladiator who is always looking for the next strongest opponent. And when he's exhausted from fighting, he goes back to Magus where he is but a skilled engineer and alchemist. And there you have it, Eric Blastman aiming at his next opponent. The third character I'm going to be drawing is from my third save file. I call this build the True Starbringer, which is derived from the build's use of true damage and the weapon being the Starlight Greatsword. I designed this build to be one that's fun to use while also having high DPS. Sometimes it can be hard to balance those two things, especially when you make a build that is so strong that it basically kills everything instantly. Now, don't get me wrong, this build does kill most things instantly, but the main difference between this build and other high DPS builds is that it does not kill major bosses in seconds. For this character, I've decided to name her Stella Frostcoat. Stella is a kitsune who wields the legendary Starlight Greatsword and is a part of the Cursed Guild. If any of you know about the Starlight Greatsword, you probably know about its unique weapon art, Starstream. Although this weapon art is one of the coolest things in the game, this build does not actually use it. Instead, this build uses Flame Slash. To understand why, I just need to show you this. Pretty crazy, right? This build manages to get around 850 DPS on average, which honestly in this meta of Voxlblade would be considered nothing too crazy. High DPS right now in Voxlblade is probably around like 2000 or something stupid like that. The three main gimmicks of the Starlight Greatsword are that every attack shoots 2 stars of a random damage type, the main damage from the sword deals true damage, and you're able to use Starstream. By the way, true damage is essentially pure damage that ignores all defenses. The reason why I use Flame Slash over the super awesome Starstream is because I need a weapon art that's short so I can get my buffs and start swinging like crazy. Starstream just takes too long, and it can also be cancelled while I'm doing it, which means there usually isn't a good time to use it during boss fights. The Flame Slash also makes quick work of groups of enemies because of its pierce and its 465 initial hit damage. A little fun thing with this build is that I can throw a tantrum like this. To really show you how stupid strong this is, here is me fighting an Iron Slayer, one of the harder mini-bosses in the game that scares the crap out of new players. Yeah. This build originally was a mock build that used deep spider gloves with Starlight Essence so I could punch really fast with stars. However, I realized that this build was not very good, and after a while of theory crafting, and some inspiration from a friend, you know who you are, I transformed it into this. Okay, that's enough yapping about what this build can do. Let's get into Stella's backstory. Stella Frostcoat is a kitsune who was born in the Icy Plateau along with her other siblings in the same litter. Stella and her siblings lived a rough childhood, as the harsh weather and fierce wildlife made for bad living conditions. Stella's mother desperately tried her best to raise her litter, but before long, only Stella and her sister Sanguine remained. Stella's mother would barely sleep because she would always watch the front of the den at night to make sure nothing came to take her children away. This meant that Stella and Sanguine had to find food during the day for their family. Luckily, their white coats made it easy to hide from prey and predators alike. The two sisters and their mother were still struggling to survive, and eventually, Stella and Sanguine's mother started to submit to the cold and hunger. She would spend hours near the edge of the den, where the wind could still sneak its way in, and she would barely eat so that her daughters could have more food. Stella's mother told her daughters that they should just leave the icy plateau and head somewhere else, even if that meant they would be outcast for being feral kitsunes. The two sisters hugged their mother one last time before she stopped breathing. They later buried their mother just outside their den, and then made the treacherous journey down the slopes of the icy plateau down to the Vinelands. When they arrived, the local orcs and dragon-blooded people of Bogtown were weary of their presence, and the residents would often try to stay away from the sisters. One day, the sisters were climbing a nearby mountain when they met Gong the monk. The sisters and Gong chatted for a long time, and they earned each other's respect. Gong decided they would teach the young kitsunes the ways of being a monk. The two sisters grew incredibly strong, and often did not even use their gloves for fighting, instead choosing to use their bare hands and claws. One day, during their training, Gong noticed that there was going to be a full moon that night, and they mentioned the old Vinelands folktale of the Starbringer. The story goes that on a night with a full moon and clear skies, there is a chance that if someone is standing on the top of the tallest mountain in the Vinelands, the Mossy Pillar, a star looking over the Vinelands might just fall from the sky and bless that person with the great power of the legendary Starlight Greatsword. This person is called the Starbringer. Later that day, the two sisters wanted to test their strength and endurance, so they raced to see who could climb the Mossy Pillar the fastest. Sanguine was barely able to beat Stella to the top due to her slightly better jumping power. By the time they had finished climbing, the sun was barely visible on the horizon. They decided to lie on their backs and watch the stars. After some time, the girls noticed that the stars had begun to change their color, and one star seemed much brighter than the others. The two sisters were awestruck with the beauty of the stars, but suddenly, at an insane speed, something came flying out of the sky and collided with Stella's head. Stella was nearly knocked unconscious, and Sanguine was horrified as her sister was screaming in pain as she felt something surging throughout her body. The thing that had collided with her was no longer sticking out from her head, but it was now absorbed into her, and there was no sign of any physical damage. Sanguine climbed down the mossy pillar as fast as she could and took Stella to the nearest doctor. Shortly after arriving at the doctor's house, she woke up invigorated. Stella said she felt more powerful than ever, and she discovered that she could now summon the legendary Starlight Greatsword. She had become the Starbringer. Over the next couple of years, Stella learned how to use her new sword and abilities, and Sanguine had finished her monk training. The two sisters were considered to be living legends, as they had successfully helped defend Bogtown from various Dragator outbreaks, along with an upcoming hometown hero, Bizarre the Gator Wrestler. Over time, Sanguine grew jealous of Stella's fame and strength, and one night she left Bogtown without saying where she was going. Stella soon left to find her sister. Sanguine had arrived at Magus in order to get her hands on a sniper model blaster ring. She knew she would need a lot to beat her sister in a fight, and that even a sniper wasn't strong enough. She soon headed for the Deadlands in search of the Void Cliffs. Stella caught wind that her sister had left Magus and followed any lead she could. Sanguine found the Void Cliffs and met a mysterious figure, and soon after, her body was filled with a vile corruption and she was surging with void energy. Sanguine emerged from the cliffs and searched for her sister. Eventually, the two sisters found each other in the middle of the Deadlands. Stella was horrified at what her sister had become and attempted to help her. Stella walked towards her sister, but before she could reach her, Sanguine summoned her rifle and shot Stella in the head. The damage was immense, but Stella wasn't going to go down that easily. She ran straight at Sanguine, and she was completely caught off guard. Sanguine wrestled with Stella, and she managed to pull her sister off of her. An intense battle broke out between the two sisters, but eventually, Stella was able to corner Sanguine and grab her. Stella then held Sanguine's hand and absorbed all of the corruption out from her body. Sanguine screamed at her sister to stop, but it was too late. Stella, now filled with corruption and bleeding on her sister's body, took a step back and said, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you today, like you were for me back then. Stella then collapsed on the ground. Sanguine, now filled with immense grief and regret, ran towards Magus. The town was devastated at the sight of Stella. The town called one of their best alchemists, Frederick Blastman, to see if he could save Stella. After some time, he was able to save Stella's life, and he called his son Eric to repair her face using Magitech technology. After Stella woke up, Sanguine hugged her sister as hard as when she last hugged their mother. Even though Stella was now filled with corruption, she was able to control it and discovered that it was able to enhance her powers even further. Now, Stella and Sanguine are an unstoppable duo who are considered heroes all across the world in their fight to stop the ever-encroaching corruption. And there you have it, Stella Frostcoat casting her flame slash on top of the mossy pillar. Wow, that was a lot. While I was writing that, I just really got into it. I hope you were able to follow along and enjoyed that little story. And if you were curious, Sanguine is actually another one of my builds. I knew that I was going to make my two Kitsune builds related somehow, but I didn't really want to draw both in the same video. When I decide to make another video like this, you'll get to see her in my other two completed builds. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed the artwork and the backstories as much as I enjoyed making them. I really hope you liked this video enough to want to check out Voxlblade for yourself. This isn't sponsored or anything, I just really like the game and I think it deserves way more players. For any of you who want to stick around and subscribe to my channel, first of all, thank you. And second of all, I'm gonna change my upload schedule. I still want to try and upload an art video every 3 months, but with college coming up next month, I have no idea what getting work for this channel done is gonna look like. So if I miss an upload in October, I'm really sorry. But also, I plan on releasing extra non-art related videos whenever I'm done with them, such as a video I'm gonna release in a few days. These videos will most likely be music that I've made, or maybe some gameplay videos if I feel up to it. Also, I hate to drag this out even more, but I just want to say thank you all so much for your support. It means so much to me. Anyway, this video is long enough now, so see ya in the next one, and have a great rest of your day.